He built a career that most actors only dream about. Oscars, box office records, a face that once stopped the world when it stepped out of a lake in a wet shirt. But right now, at 65 years old, Colin Firth's life looks nothing like the fairy tale everyone assumed he was living. Behind the awards and the charm was a childhood that left deep wounds, a private battle with terror that almost ended his career before it began, and a betrayal so personal and so cruel that it would break most people completely. This is the real story of what happened to Colin Firth, and why his life today is so much heavier than anyone expected. Colin Firth was born on September 10, 1960, in a small town called Greyshot in Hampshire, England. His parents were both teachers. His father taught history at a university level, and his mother taught comparative religion, a subject built around trying to understand people who are different from you. It's almost ironic, because young Colin would spend his childhood desperately trying to fit in, not stand out. His parents' jobs took the family overseas early in his life. He spent time in Nigeria, and then a year in St. Louis, Missouri, before the family moved back to England. All that moving around meant Colin never really felt like he belonged anywhere. He was always the new kid, always adjusting, always starting over, packing up friendships almost as soon as he had built them. When the family settled back in England, Colin was enrolled at a rough secondary school in Winchester, and this is where things got painful. He was the son of two teachers, which made him a target. Kids can be brutal toward anyone who seems smart, different, or soft, and Colin checked every one of those boxes. The bullying got bad enough that he changed who he was just to survive it. He deliberately altered the way he spoke so he wouldn't sound like a teacher's kid. He pretended not to care about school, even though his grades had always mattered to him. He wasn't trying to be someone else because he wanted to. He was trying to become invisible because visibility meant getting hurt. Looking back on those years later in life, Colin admitted that he became so skilled at hiding his true self that he sometimes struggled to remember who he actually was underneath the performance. Those years shaped him in ways that never fully went away, and some who have studied his career believe that early habit of masking pain to survive is exactly what made him such a convincing actor later on. At 18, with almost nothing to his name, Colin made the leap that changed everything. He moved to London with no connections in the entertainment industry and barely any money. He had been accepted into the prestigious Drama Centre London, but the term hadn't started yet, and he needed rent money. So he took a job in the wardrobe department at the National Theatre, spending his days handling costumes for actors who were already living the life he could only dream about. It was hard, low-paying work, but it kept a roof over his head while he waited for his shot. That shot came during his final year at drama school. Colin was cast as Hamlet in a student production, and in the audience one night sat a respected playwright named Julia Mitchell, who was scouting for new talent. Mitchell was so impressed that he cast Colin in the West End production of Another Country in 1983, stepping into a role that had previously been played by Rupert Everett. The play was a hit, and just like that, Colin Firth was a working actor. By the late 1980s, film historians were grouping him with names like Gary Oldman and Daniel Day-Lewis as part of a wave of serious young British actors who cared more about the craft than the glamour. Then came 1995, and everything changed. Colin took on the role of Mr. Darcy in the BBC's adaptation of Pride and Prejudice. It was a slow, faithful production, nothing flashy, nothing built for instant hype. But one scene changed the course of his entire life. Colin emerged from a lake in a soaked linen shirt, and audiences lost their minds. Almost overnight, the serious, brooding actor became one of the most desired men on television, watched by more than 10 million viewers a week in the UK alone. From there, he became a fixture in massive romantic comedies, starring in Bridget Jones's Diary, Love Actually, and Mamma Mia. His films have made more than $3 billion worldwide, and his personal fortune is estimated at over $25 million. On paper, it looked like Colin Firth had everything, but money and fame were never going to be enough to protect him from what was coming. What most fans never saw was how much Colin was struggling behind the scenes, long before anyone knew his name. In 1989, right as his career in British film was taking off, he did something that confused everyone around him. He simply disappeared. No announcement, no explanation. he just vanished from the industry. The reason was a woman. He had fallen deeply in love with Canadian actress Meg Tilly, and the two of them decided to walk away from the noise of the entertainment world entirely. They moved to a hand-built, off-grid log cabin deep in the wilderness of British Columbia, so remote that their nearest neighbor was miles away. For nearly 5 years, Colin lived in complete isolation. He wasn't acting. He wasn't auditioning. He became a stay-at-home stepfather to Tilly's children, and the couple welcomed a son together, William, in 1990. To stay sane and pay the bills, he worked with his hands as a carpenter, building furniture piece by piece, learning a trade that had nothing to do with fame or performance. He later admitted that during those years, he genuinely believed his acting career was over for good. He thought he had walked away, and the industry had simply moved on without him. Friends who knew him during this period said he seemed genuinely at peace for the first time in years, finally free from the pressure of being watched and judged. Eventually, he did return to acting, but the man audiences saw as calm and polished on screen was fighting a private war every single time he had to perform. Colin has dealt with severe, paralyzing stage fright and panic attacks for most of his adult life. This isn't ordinary nervousness before a show. It's a kind of terror that makes it hard to breathe, hard to think, hard to even remember your own lines. During a live theater run at London's Donmar Warehouse in 1999, his anxiety hit a breaking point on opening night. He locked himself inside a backstage bathroom stall, trying to escape the panic building inside him, while an entire audience waited on the other side of the curtain. When he finally tried to step outside for air to calm himself down, he made a mistake that haunted him for years. He walked out through a fire exit, assuming he could walk back in the same way. The heavy door locked automatically behind him, and suddenly one of the most famous actors in Britain was standing in an alley in full costume, with no way back inside. He had to sprint around the entire building, run through the front lobby, and beg security to let him backstage in time. He walked onto that stage shaking, red-faced, and completely rattled, and the audience never had any idea what had just happened. It's a strange thing to think about, one of the most celebrated actors of his generation, locked out of his own show in an alley, panicking alone while thousands of people waited without a clue. That same anxiety followed him into one of the most important roles of his career. To play the stammering King George VI in The King's Speech, Colin spent months working with speech therapists, training his mouth and mind to produce a convincing stutter. He practiced it so intensely that it became almost automatic. After he won the Academy Award for the role in 2011, something strange and unsettling happened. The stutter he had trained himself to perform started showing up on its own, uninvited, whenever he was tired or stressed in real life. He would be in the middle of a completely normal conversation and suddenly find himself stammering, as if some part of King George had never fully left him. Speech coaches later noted that this kind of lingering effect is more common than people realize, especially when an actor trains a physical habit so intensely that the brain stops treating it as an act. Right after that Oscar win, Colin caused a stir that surprised a lot of people. In a live television interview, he revealed that he was politically opposed to the idea of an unelected monarchy, despite having just won an award for playing a king. Critics accused him of hypocrisy, saying he was happy to cash the check, but not willing to respect the tradition behind it. Colin didn't back down. He has always been outspoken politically, even when it cost him public support, later publicly cutting ties with a political party after they broke a promise he had believed in. But none of that controversy, none of those early struggles, came close to preparing him for the betrayal that was still ahead. In 1997, Colin married Livia Gigioli, an Italian film producer who shared his passion for meaningful storytelling. For 20 years, they were seen as one of the great couples of international cinema, splitting their time between London and a private estate in Italy. They had 2 sons together. From the outside, it looked like they had cracked the code that so many celebrity marriages never figure out. But behind closed doors, cracks had started to form. Between 2015 and 2016, the couple quietly agreed to a private separation. No press release, no legal filing, just space to figure out if their marriage still had a future. During that time apart, Livia became involved in an intense, secret 11-month affair with an Italian journalist named Marco Brancaccia, someone she had actually known since childhood, long before Colin ever entered her life. When Livia decided to end the affair in late 2016 and return to Colin to rebuild their marriage, Brancaccia refused to let her go. What followed was a full year of psychological harassment. He sent threatening messages, made unwanted calls, and showed up in places he knew she would be. When he realized he couldn't have her back, he decided to make her suffer instead. He gathered an enormous collection of intimate photos, private messages, and detailed descriptions of their relationship, organized it deliberately to cause the most damage possible, and sent the entire thing straight to Colin's personal email inbox. This wasn't a moment of weakness or a slip. It was calculated cruelty aimed directly at destroying a marriage that had already survived so much. Colin and Livia refused to be intimidated. In early 2018, they made the difficult decision to file a formal stalking complaint with Italian prosecutors, knowing full well that doing so would force the affair into public record. Police seized Brancaccia's devices as part of the investigation, but the court documents leaked, and suddenly the private pain Colin had been carrying became a public spectacle. His team was forced to publicly confirm that his wife had spent nearly a year in a secret affair with the man now accused of stalking her. Photographers camped outside his home. Reporters shouted questions every time he stepped outside. In July of 2018, right before the criminal trial was set to begin, Colin's legal team arranged an emergency settlement to keep the most explicit evidence out of the public record for good. They paid Brancaccia an undisclosed amount, and in exchange, he accepted the stalking conviction quietly. The legal matter was closed, but the emotional damage was already permanent. Colin and Livia tried to save their marriage after that. They went to counseling. They spent time together at their estate in Italy. But the trust that had taken 20 years to build had been shattered in a single email, and by December of 2019, their team confirmed what many had already guessed. After 22 years of marriage, they were officially separating. During the worst of the scandal, when tabloids were updating the story almost every day, paparazzi photos showed a very different Colin Firth than the one fans remembered. He looked gaunt, hollow, and exhausted, his cheekbones sharp, his clothes hanging loosely off a frame that had clearly lost too much weight. Fans posted side-by-side comparisons of his Pride and Prejudice days next to these new photos, and the difference was heartbreaking to see. The pain he had been carrying privately had become impossible to hide. In 2017, as his marriage was falling apart, Colin made a quiet but meaningful decision. He officially became a dual citizen of Italy. His children held Italian citizenship through their mother, and he wanted to make sure no legal barrier could ever come between him and them. It was practical, but it was also emotional, a quiet signal that part of his life now belonged somewhere else entirely. Livia eventually moved on completely. In November of 2025, she quietly revealed that she had privately married a new partner named Callum Grieve, with no press release and no fanfare, just a simple post confirming what people had suspected. For Colin, it was one more sign that the chapter of his life that had included Livia was permanently closed. Interestingly, even after remarrying, Livia has continued using the Firth surname publicly, later explaining that technical issues had blocked her attempts to change it, while also admitting that she still considers herself connected to that identity because of her children. Whether Colin has any feelings about that, he has never said publicly. He has always been more private than people expect from someone so famous. Then, in May of 2025, the family faced an entirely new crisis. Livia revealed that she had been secretly battling an aggressive breast cancer diagnosis for months, going through treatment and surgery completely out of the public eye before finally sharing the news once she was confident she would survive. For Colin, despite everything that had happened between them, this created an entirely new responsibility. He became an emotional anchor for their two adult sons, Luca and Matteo, born in 2001 and 2003, who were terrified watching their mother go through grueling treatment. Colin set aside whatever bitterness remained and simply showed up. He sat through appointments. He let his sons lean on him during the hardest moments. The man who had been betrayed became the man holding the family together while she fought for her life. Thankfully, Livia's treatment was successful, and she recovered. But the experience left another mark on Colin, pulling him right back into deep emotional labor, just as he was starting to heal from everything before it. So what does Colin Firth's life actually look like now, at 65? In many ways, his career has transformed completely. The romantic lead, who once made audiences swoon, is now taking on darker, heavier roles, playing grieving fathers and broken men instead of charming heroes. In February of 2025, fans were dealt a heavy blow when it was revealed that his most iconic modern character, Mark Darcy from the Bridget Jones films, had been killed off in the newest installment, turning the story into a meditation on grief and loss instead of romance. Just 1 month before that, Colin had starred in the historical series Lockerbie, playing a real father who spent decades searching for justice after losing his daughter, a role that clearly drew from pain he understood all too well. Critics said it was some of the best work of his entire career. He is currently filming a dark detective series for Apple TV+, playing a character defined by cynicism and emotional damage, about as far from Mr. Darcy as an actor can get. He also recently wrapped a physically demanding shoot in freezing conditions for an upcoming young Sherlock series, taking on stunt work that most men his age wouldn't attempt. And this summer, he appears alongside Emily Blunt in a massive Steven Spielberg blockbuster, proving that even after everything, his career is far from finished. There is even talk of him returning once more to the spy franchise that made him an action star later in life, a role that fans have been hoping to see revived for years, showing that despite his age and everything he has endured, the industry still sees him as someone worth building major films around. In his personal life, Colin has found quiet stability with his Italian girlfriend, Eleonora Pedron. They avoid the spotlight almost entirely, rarely appearing on red carpets together, choosing privacy over publicity. Remarkably, reports suggest that Livia, her new husband Colin, and Eleonora now maintain a strange but functional extended family, occasionally spending time together for the sake of the children they all still share a bond with. It's not the fairy tale ending anyone imagined for him decades ago, but after everything Colin Firth has survived, from childhood bullying, to crushing stage fright, to a betrayal that made headlines around the world, simply finding peace might be the most meaningful ending of all.